One of the things that I really invited myself to do with this project that seems to want to be a podcast for now is to speak in draft. So to just have an idea or something would hit me or be with me for a while, and I could maybe speak about it without needing to know exactly what's going to come out. And so the thing that's been coming up is around how storytelling, particularly storytelling in pop culture, is evolving and what that might mean for the culture that it is both being birthed from and helping shape. And this came up because I've been watching Andor, which is a great show. Andor is about, it exists in the Star Wars universe, and I think it happens right before in the years leading up to the very first Star Wars movie that came out in 1977, which is the first movie that I ever saw in my life. Now you know how old I am, ish. And one of the things that I've been noticing and really loving about Andor is that it's not about a singular hero. Even though it's called Andor and is based on that character who first appeared in the, I think Rogue One is the name of the movie. It's not about that character. It's about this network of characters, all of whom cumulatively have a large impact, but none of whom on their own are really traditional heroes in the sense of what we saw in the original Star Wars movie. So just to contrast them a little more, when making Star Wars, George Lucas essentially reversed engineered it from the hero's journey, which was derived by mythologist Joseph Campbell through an examination of myths and stories from all over the world throughout history. And from his examination of those myths, he kind of derived this overarching story structure that he called the hero's journey. And it was made really famous in this book, the Hero with a Thousand Faces. George Lucas read that, he loved it, and he developed this whole space opera that became Star Wars, essentially slotting a story into the structure that was delineated by Joseph Campbell. And so you have a young farm boy, Luke Skywalker, who is doing fine. His life is chugging along. And then something big happens, right? A call to adventure, and he sets out to find his destiny. So we're following a singular hero, and although they're supporting characters, it really is Luke Skywalker's story throughout those first three movies. We're following this singular hero on a journey of self-discovery. And we see that over and over and over again in movies, American movies of the 19s and 90s. There is a hero. It could be Rocky. It could be John McClane in Die Hard. But whoever it is, they are a hero. They are tested. They have to overcome challenges in order to X, whatever X is. If it's Indiana Jones, they find the Holy Grail. If it's Rocky, they beat Mr. T or the Dolph Lundgren, right? Whoever the bad guy was. So in these movies, we're being asked to identify with this single heroic figure who is also working to overcome a singular adversary, an antagonist. Darth Vader, Mr. T, Dolph Lundgren, Alan Rickman. I don't know any of the characters' names. These were just the bad guys in these movies. So we have a good guy going on a journey, overcoming challenges to defeat a bad guy and save the day, usually to get the girl at the end. If you grew up like me in the 1980s and 90s, these were the stories that culturally were being ingrained into our story maps, right? Our neural story maps. A neural story map is simply a web of connections, experiences, and stories that exist beyond a conscious level that our brain creates to filter our experience of the world. So if I have a neural story map that was woven and shaped by these very traditional, linear, good, battling and overcoming evil narratives, then that's going to shape the way that I see everything from my professional life, my dating life, politics, whatever it might be. Now let's take a look at how storytelling has shifted a little bit. So in Andor, right, there's no singular character. Nobody is overcoming a singular bad guy. There is a monolithic force that we also get to meet individual people within that is this construct of the Empire. And then you have all of these kind of ensemble of characters that are working beneath the surface in a mycelial way to advance the rebellion, right? To have the foundation and the structure of the empire crumble. Profoundly different kind of storytelling. So if I'm a child and I'm growing up and I'm watching stories like Andor, realizing there is no singular bad guy to overcome, realizing that progress comes through collaboration and networking rather than a singular hero, that is going to weave a very different neural story net than watching Rocky, or haven't brought up Top Gun yet, things like that. Now, we also see that because I'm talking about kids in Disney movies, right? Growing up with The Lion King or The Little Mermaid or Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, there's always an antagonist. There is a not particularly nuanced evil character who is perpetrating some kind of nefarious plan to take control over the righteous leadership of the realm, whether that is a princess, a king, a lion, whatever. If we look at more recent Disney movies, and my favorite example of this is Encanto, which if you haven't seen it, it's so lovely. There's no bad guy in Encanto. There's challenges, and there is sort of a hero, but really it's about a family moving from this idea that they are the heroes of their village, of their society, to coming to realize by overcoming ancestral family trauma that they are part of a larger community that then shows up to support them. That is a radically different journey than Simba beating Scar to take over leadership of the pride that his father led. So we're moving into this world of more nuanced, complex, and I think interesting storytelling. And so, what does that tell us about the culture that is seeking to emerge, the collective neural story map that is emergent in this moment? So if we place this in the context, because all of these stories come and are generated in the United States, if we zoom out and put this in the context of the United States, this country was formed by a lot of energies, but one of the primary energies was one of flattening and moving from complex interaction of cultures to essentially like a monoculture by stamping out the beliefs, the lives of indigenous peoples by anyone who did not hew pretty closely to the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. So we have this very linear approach to culture, this linear approach to story. There is good, there is evil. There are cowboys, there are Indians. There's Simba, there's Scar. And we're coming to a place in the cultural experiment where I think collectively, and this might not be at a conscious level in any kind of wide way, there is an understanding that that unilinear story, that monolithic story, has reached the end of its shelf life. It is no longer useful. It's very harmful. It's harmful to the environment. It's harmful to our brains. It's harmful to our relationships. And so, what's really interesting to witness is how that shift in popular storytelling, the stuff that all of us consume, the new movie-ish movie Sinners is another great example. It's a story that on the face of it is about two brothers overcoming vampires, but is really about that battle between a single collective story that stamps out complexity and wanting to live in a more nuanced, complex, ecosystemic way. So I'm so curious to see how these stories will start to shape the very culture that they were birthed from, how it will start to change the way that we lead, change the way that we go about social change, social impact, all of these things, because they are inextricably connected because of the weaving of those neural story nets. Let's see if there's anything else that wants to be said on this. This is something that I'm really passionate about, by the way. I think the other thing that wants to be shared is I'm not coming at this blind. I've been working in the field of organizational storytelling for 15 years, mostly in nonprofits. And I honestly remember being a kid and reading a book of fairy tales, which of course were all about kings and queens and princes. And I remember asking my parents at some point, what about everyone else? Like, what is everybody else doing when these heroes and heroines are going on their journeys of self discovery? How is it impacting the wider universe of human and more than human beings? And so it's really interesting that that curiosity has stayed with me. I think I was 7 or 8 when I asked that question, but that awareness that there are lots of an infinite number of stories occurring at any given moment in any given ecosystem, the natural world, social constructs, whatever it might be, and how interesting and powerful it can be to allow those ecosystemic stories to step forward and into the spotlight, as opposed to just those singular stories that cut through the culture as opposed to reflect and shape it. So, those are some field notes from the world of popular storytelling. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.